Hello, and thank you for listening in to learn more about the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission's proposed rule changes for spotted sea trout. This presentation provides background about the new management approach for sea trout and provides an overview for our evaluation of the sea trout fishery within the proposed Sarasota Bay region. So why are we here to talk about spotted sea trout? FWC is proposing to implement a more holistic regional management approach for spotted sea trout, similar to the approach used for redfish and snook. This new management strategy will divide the state into 9 management regions, and the sea trout fishery in each region will be assessed using 6 management metrics. This will allow greater flexibility for addressing smaller scale issues, concerns, and preferences. Using the new approach, staff will recommend regulations based on their evaluation of the sea trout fishery within each of the proposed management regions. Summaries of the evaluation will be captured in each region's annual review, which will be posted online once complete. We would like to hear your thoughts on these proposed regulation changes and this new holistic regional management approach. This presentation will begin with a brief overview of sea trout in Florida, including their biology and information on the recreational and commercial fisheries. It will then cover the sea trout management, including how regions have evolved over time, and cover current statewide and recreational harvest regulations. Finally, the presentation will introduce the proposed holistic management approach, summarize metric evaluations and stakeholder feedback, and outline the proposed rule changes. Spotted sea trout occur along the U.S. Gulf and Atlantic coasts, from Texas to Cape Cod, spending their entire life cycle in inshore and nearshore waters. In Florida, most spotted sea trout become sexually mature by the end of their first year, at about 12 inches in length. Female sea trout grow faster and make up a large portion of the fish that are above the slot limit. Sea trout spawn multiple times each year, typically from spring through fall, and most individuals remain in the estuary where they are born. Sea trout are particularly vulnerable to environmental changes such as habitat loss, rapid salinity changes, and harmful algal blooms. Sea trout is one of Florida's most popular inshore recreational fisheries, targeted in nearly every major estuary. Since the late 1980s, releases, which is the black dashed line, have exceeded landings, the solid magenta line, showing that the fishery is now primarily catch and release. Commercial harvest occurs statewide, but is mostly concentrated in the northern regions along both coastlines of Florida. Landings, shown in the bottom graph, dropped sharply after the 1995 Net Limitation Amendment went into effect and have remained low since. Today, commercial landings account for less than 1% of the total statewide harvest. Over the years, both FWC and one of our predecessor agencies, the Marine Fisheries Commission, have worked closely with stakeholders to understand the regional differences in the fishery and adapt our management approach appropriately. Previous management changes stemmed from stock assessment results and concerns brought forward by stakeholders. The FWC has continuously engaged with stakeholders to gain a deeper understanding of the fishery in each area of the state and identify regulation changes to meet management objectives. This has led to adjustments of management regions and regional regulations to meet the management goals while simultaneously addressing differences in the fishery. Together, we found solutions that work to meet our management target while maintaining access to the resource. Let's look at how those management regions have evolved over time. Spotted sea trout have been regionally managed since 1996. Since then, these management regions have evolved over time to address differences in the fishery around the state. In the map on the far left, you can see the 3 original management regions adopted in 1996: Northeast, South, and Northwest. These regions were in place until 2012, when 4 management regions were implemented, and the South region was split into 2, the Southwest and Southeast. This can be seen in the middle map. In 2020, FWC implemented the regional boundaries that are currently in place, shown in the map on the far right. As I mentioned earlier, the rule changes and regions associated with this evolution were a collaborative effort between FWC staff and stakeholders. This slide provides an overview of current spotted sea trout regulations in Florida. Most of the current recreational and commercial regulations shown in this table apply statewide in both state and adjacent federal waters. Some, however, vary by region, which will be covered in the next slide. The regulations currently in place took effect in 2020 and are designed to maintain access to the resource while meeting the management goal of 35% spawning potential ratio, or SPR. Some of these regulations are in place to increase post-release survival, such as prohibiting the use of multiple hooks when using natural bait and close seasons during the colder months, when sea trout are more vulnerable to post-release mortality. The spotted sea trout fishery has been managed regionally since 1996, and the 5 current management regions, shown on this map, were established in 2020. Each region is managed differently, with distinct recreational bag limits and seasonal closures for both the recreational and commercial fisheries. Over the past year, FWC staff have been engaging with stakeholders to gather feedback on the sea trout fishery and proposed management changes following the completion of a new sea trout stock assessment. This included an angler satisfaction survey to gain a better understanding of angler perceptions and experiences with the spotted sea trout fishery. This survey went to all 4 hire guides and a subset of recreational anglers. Staff continued stakeholder engagement at the inaugural Spotted Sea Trout Symposium, which was a one-day in-person event that brought together over 100 stakeholders, researchers, and fisheries managers to share insights and discuss the future of the sea trout fishery. In September, FWC held 19 workshops to introduce the new management approach and gather feedback on potential regulation changes. Additional public comment was collected through the FWC Saltwater Comments webpage, email, and phone calls. At the November 2025 meeting, FWC commissioners approved the proposed rules to implement the new management approach. This fall, FWC is holding 12 public workshops to gather feedback on the proposed rules before a final rule hearing at the February 2026 FWC Commission meeting. We heard from a lot of people at this point, and here's what we've learned so far. Among the 3,500 stakeholders staff have engaged, most have expressed satisfaction with the fishery and current regulations in their region, though some requested regional adjustments to address local concerns. This new management approach for sea trout is the next step in FWC's transition to holistic regional management for Florida's popular inshore fisheries. This follows the successful adoption of similar frameworks for redfish in 2022 and snook in 2024, which have received positive feedback from stakeholders. This approach brings a holistic view to management decisions by using multiple metrics, including human and environmental factors, to evaluate the fishery on a smaller regional scale. This new approach would establish 9 management regions and evaluate the sea trout fishery in each region using 6 management metrics. This approach allows us to better understand differences in stakeholders' experiences, perceptions, and preferences, and would give us more flexibility in addressing regional differences in the fishery. The proposed 9 management regions are shown in the map on the slide. These region boundaries were carefully designed based on a variety of factors, including sea trout biology, differences in habitat characteristics, identifiable geographic boundaries, FWC stock assessment boundaries, and stakeholder and FWC law enforcement feedback. Overall, these boundaries are intended to identify fairly discrete units of sea trout, encompass similar habitat types and ecology, and minimize the likelihood of anglers fishing in 2 regions on the single trip. These regions would align with those already in place for snook and redfish, creating consistency among species as requested by the commissioners. This makes it easier for anglers to comply with regulations. Within each of the recommended regions, up to 6 metrics are used to evaluate the local sea trout fishery. Staff will continue to monitor SPR trends over time and maintain the current 35% SPR goal. Habitat is critical for sea trout growth, survival, and recruitment. Staff will monitor both short and long-term trends in acreage for seagrass, salt marsh, and mangroves. The harmful algal bloom metric focuses on Carenia brevis, or red tide, which can cause fish kills and impact sea trout populations. Staff will evaluate the frequency and average duration of annual blooms in each region and compare recent bloom activity to historical patterns. Relative abundance is developed by FWC's Fishery Independent Monitoring Program, which conducts sampling in several estuaries in Florida. These data are used to track yearly changes in abundance and monitor trends over time for young of year and adult sea trout. Fishing effort and landings estimates are generated from NOAA's Marine Recreational Information Program. This information is used between stock assessments to provide insight into fishing activity and evaluate the effects of regulation changes. Staff will assess this metric by monitoring annual changes and long-term trends. Stakeholder feedback collected through surveys, workshops, direct communication, and online comments help staff better understand angler satisfaction at the regional level. This input is an important part of the rulemaking process, and staff will continue to incorporate it into the management approach for spotted sea trout. On this slide is an example of our annual review for the proposed Sarasota Bay region. These two-page publications will be completed each year and posted on our website. These documents summarize all available metric information along with staff's interpretation of the data. Our goal is to promote open conversations around fishery trends and management decisions, empowering stakeholders to engage in the process. This strategy has been successful in our management of redfish and snook, and we are confident it will be equally effective for spotted sea trout. Let's look closer at the boundaries of the current South region and then the new proposed Sarasota Bay region using the maps on the slide. The current South Management region runs through the Fred Howard Park Causeway in Pinellas near the Pasco County line through Broward County on the Atlantic coastline. The proposed new Sarasota Bay Management region would extend from State Road 64 in Manatee County and run south to the Venice Municipal Airport in Sarasota County. This includes all inland waters of the area colored yellow on the map, including all waters of Palmasola Bay, Philippi Creek, Cowpen Slough, and Curry Creek. Over the next few slides, we'll take a closer look at each of the 6 metrics and highlight key takeaways from our inaugural evaluation of the spotted sea trout fishery in the proposed Sarasota Bay region. The first metric, spawning potential ratio, or SPR, is used to evaluate the impact of fishing on the sea trout stock. SPR is the ratio of the total biomass of mature fish in a fished population to the total biomass that would exist if the population were not fished. Achieving the 35% SPR goal maintains the stock above the biological limit of 20% SPR and maintains resiliency within the stock. An SPR at 20% or less is not sustainable, and managing for a higher SPR provides for higher abundance and large trophy sea trout. We monitor SPR trends over time and compare SPR from the stock assessment to our management goal. The sea trout fishery was last assessed and in the 2024 stock assessment, which determined that the Gulf stock was exceeding the 35% SPR management goal. This metric will be maintained in the new management approach and updated with each spotted sea trout stock assessment, which typically occurs every 4 to 6 years. It is important to note that SPR is determined at the stock level, so it is not appropriate to assess it at a smaller regional scale. Despite the positive results, the angler experience on the water does not always align with the stock assessment. The quality of someone's fishing trip can vary based on where they are fishing, as the fishing experience is impacted by local variables, such as environmental conditions, fish behavior and distribution, and fishing activity. Because of these reasons, it is important to bring in other information to provide a more holistic view of the fishery. In the next several slides, we will discuss our assessment of the 5 other metrics being used to evaluate the spotted sea trout fishery in this region. Stakeholder feedback is the next metric used to assess spotted sea trout. It is collected to better understand angler satisfaction at a regional scale. As mentioned earlier, the quality of someone's fishing experience can vary depending on location and does not always align with stock assessment results. We gather stakeholder feedback using a variety of methods to capture current angler satisfaction and track changes over time. The pie charts shown here and in the annual review summarize survey responses to one of the questions in the 2025 Angler Satisfaction Survey sent out earlier this year. This question asked anglers to describe their fishing experience for sea trout during the past 12 months. Responses from the charts are from anglers who indicated they primarily fished within the proposed Sarasota Bay region over the past 12 months. The results from the region indicated that over half of recreational anglers and 4 hire guides reported their recent spotted sea trout fishing experience as very good or good. There was a higher proportion of for-hire guides in this region who selected either very poor or poor compared to recreational anglers. In relative abundance is another metric that can inform how a sea trout population changes over time. FWC's Fishery Independent Monitoring Program, or FIM, conducts sampling in several estuaries around the state using small and large seines. The data from this sampling are used to develop annual abundance trends for spotted sea trout that are less than a year old, also called young of year, and subadult and adult spotted sea trout that are greater than 8 inches. This data is used to track yearly changes in abundance and monitor trends over time. The top graph on the slide shows young of year sea trout abundance, and the graph on the bottom shows adult abundance. In Sarasota Bay, we see annual variability for both young of year and adult sea trout, but no clear long-term trends. Additionally, the trends do not indicate any long-term impact from the unusual and prolonged 2017 to 2019 red tide event that occurred in this part of Florida. The next metric is fishing effort and landings generated from NOAA's Marine Recreational Information Program, also known as MRIP. This program uses information gathered from angler intercepts and mailed surveys to estimate recreational landings, releases, and effort. While these data feed directly into stock assessments, tracking them annually provides insight into fishing activity in between assessments and helps evaluate the impacts of regulation changes. We evaluate this metric by monitoring yearly changes and long-term trends. The graph on the slide displays lines indicating the total estimated catch, with landings in orange and releases in blue. The gray bars represent the number of estimated annual trips targeting spotted sea trout for this region. Fishing effort and landings peaked between 2010 and 2012, but have since returned to similar levels to those observed in the early 2000s. Landings were lower than average in 2019 through 2022 when the fishery operated under catch and release only regulations in response to an unusual and prolonged red tide event. Habitat is another important metric that is being used in the evaluation of the spotted sea trout fishery. Healthy habitats, specifically seagrass, salt marsh, and mangroves, are essential for growth, survival, and recruitment, and changes in these habitats can have implications for population resiliency. We monitor both short and long-term trends in acreage of these critical habitat types over time. The map shows the recent seagrass acreage in Sarasota Bay. Following declines from 2018 to 2022, seagrass acreage has increased in recent years, potentially in response to improving water quality conditions. Although not shown on the slide, mangrove swamps have been relatively stable in recent years. The final metric is harmful algal blooms, or HABs, which specifically look at Karenia brevis, also known as red tide. Red tide releases neurotoxins that can kill marine life, including spotted sea trout. Red tide is evaluated based on the frequency and average duration of annual blooms observed in this region. Additionally, we compare the previous year's blooms activity to historical bloom patterns in the region. Red tide occurs routinely in the Sarasota Bay region and can impact inshore fisheries directly through fish kills and indirectly through habitat degradation. This region typically experiences about 4 months with red tide concentration levels that could impact fish. In 2024, red tide bloom events that reached concentration levels that could have impacted fisheries in this area were shorter than average. Overall, staff's evaluation of the metrics for the Sarasota Bay region indicate the fishery is doing well and anglers are satisfied with the current regulations. Staff have proposed to establish the new Sarasota Bay region and implement similar regulations as the current South region. The middle column in this table shows the current regulations for the South region, which is outlined in the top right map. The far right column in the table lists the proposed regulations for the new Sarasota Bay region, which is outlined in the bottom right map. The proposed regulations for the new Sarasota Bay region include a 3 fish per person recreational bag limit, allowing recreational anglers to harvest 1 fish over the 19-inch maximum slot limit per vessel, or 1 per person when fishing from shore, a 15 to 19-inch recreational slot limit, a 15 to 24-inch commercial slot limit, no recreational close season, a commercial close season from November 1st through May 31st, a 50 fish per person commercial bag limit, and a 50 fish commercial vessel limit if only 1 SPL holder is fishing, and 100 fish if 2 or more SPL holders are on the vessel. We are interested in all feedback, but most importantly, we'd like to hear your feedback on the proposed regulations for the new Sarasota Bay region. which are listed in the table on the slide. Let us know what you think by visiting myfwc.com/saltwater comments and leave us a comment. Please make sure to select spotted sea trout as the topic when submitting the form. Thank you for taking the time to learn more about spotted sea trout and the proposed new holistic management approach and regional regulations. During November and December 2025, FWC held 8 in-person workshops across Florida, as represented by the stars on the map, along with 4 regional-focused virtual webinars. This recording is one of 9 recorded presentations that staff created for the proposed management regions. The recordings for each region can be found by visiting myfwc.com/saltwater workshops. If you or someone you know would like to provide comments, there are multiple opportunities to weigh in. You can provide comments through our web form at myfwc.com/saltwater comments or email them to marine@myfwc.com. After evaluating the feedback, we plan to present a final rule proposal to the Commissioners at the February 2026 Commission meeting. The Commission presentation will include a summary of the feedback that we have received through this workshop and other stakeholder engagement efforts. Members of the public will also have the opportunity to comment on the final proposed rules at the February Commission meeting. That concludes this presentation. Thank you again for taking the time to listen in. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact staff at marine@myfwc.com.